How are we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you back to our off-season coverage of the Pitt Panthers Dynasty. When we last left, we had just gone through the coaching carousel. We had seen who was leaving for the Panthers and around the NCAA, and the Panthers were in the midst of a recruiting battle as we inched toward National Signing Day, and that day is here. The Panthers setting their sights on two big recruits, Jay Keys, an athlete that more than likely will be a quarterback or a receiver, and David Butler, an outside linebacker that will add great depth. And the Panthers were able to claim the signatures of both Keys and Butler and brought them into the fold for this recruiting class. They really just were the cherry on top of a very solid recruiting class for Pat Narduzzi. Keys, of course, chose the Panthers over Purdue. Butler chose the Panthers over Georgia Tech. Panthers ended up just putting so many points into those players that we were able to pull away and come away with two of the best recruits that we've signed in this career mode, and guys that can make an immediate impact for the team this year. And as we look through the rest of our recruits, we'll go through position by position, and this is where we're going to get to the point of you guys becoming a recruit, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Justin Walden, of course, was our quarterback recruit we brought in. He was originally projected 76 overall, but he only came in as a 68, so he's actually more than likely going to potentially not even play quarterback for us. We'll have to see about our depth there. Jay Keys will be a quarterback more than likely. Maurice Wade and Bogoff, both decent four-star halfback recruits, but then when we scouted them, they weren't terribly great, not a ton of top-end speed, and they were just 69, 68 overall, so they'll need a bit more seasoning. Calvin Edwards, same thing. He was a good recruit, two-star. We needed a fullback for some depth. We thought we'd progress him. He came in as 64 projected, turned out being a 57, so a bit tough there. Tom Thomas and Thomas Alexander both are receiver recruits. Thomas Alexander actually looks very, very good. He's got good speed, very good size, only a 3-star, but he comes in at 70 overall. So I think after a year of redshirting, he'll definitely be a factor for us in probably his sophomore and junior years when he gets more time to play. Bill Matthews, very solid 4-star recruit, 70 overall, should eventually become a starter. Lonnie Jackson, though, I think he was a -8. Bust recruit as a tackle for us, so tough break there. Charles Rhodes, though, 74 overall already as a guard. The 4-star from Forestville, Ohio, will probably be, he might not be starting, but he'll compete for playing time this year and potentially next year already. Lamar Davis, same thing, comes in one of the best recruits in the entire nation as a center, and unfortunately we already have a really good center who'll be stepping in John Cooper, but he's a good player as well. Louis Hills, a very solid defensive end from Maine. That's our second Maine defensive end, which, wow, it's a recruiting hotbed up there for us. But he's a good, solid player. Probably will redshirt, but very solid. David Butler, we've already talked about. He'll be slotting right in at outside linebacker, probably as the backup on both sides because we just have two outside linebacker contributors returning next year. Drew Holland, also a huge recruit for us, 79 overall. Joel Woods was a 4-star, so a ton of 4-stars we brought in, but not a lot of them ready to immediately contribute. Woods only 69 overall, not a great player. Drew Holland, 79 overall, though, out of Bel Air, Florida. Not terribly large for a safety nowadays, 5'11", but good solid 201 pounds. Looks to be fantastic. 79 overall already, and we're going to have a senior starting safety and a junior who could potentially go to the draft starting safety. So Holland is going to need to be ready to be a contributor from day one and probably a starter by his sophomore year. There's no doubt about that. But you can see our entire recruiting class here as we go through it. Pretty solid and well-rounded. We've got players at almost every position coming in. We got some linebackers, a defensive end, a safety. We brought in, of course, some receivers, a quarterback, some running backs, a couple of offensive linemen, a fullback. So definitely a very complete recruiting class for us. We got a couple of good skill position players. And, of course, when you look through that lineup, the thing I like to do in every offseason is some of these guys, they all come in very boring. Tom Thomas, not great names. Calvin Edwards is a sweet name. But for the most part, Bogoff, kind of a boring, no character name. So this is where I give you guys the opportunity. I'll put it in the comments what we expect from you guys. But if you have a player that you think would have a good renaming that you want to become, or you want to create a story for this player, give me their name, what number you'd like them to wear, their new name, I should say, what number you'd like them to wear, who they're replacing as far as recruits are concerned, the gear that you think they should wear, that you'd like them to wear. So, what helmet, and do they wear gloves, sweatbands, etc. And then a little bit of a backstory about them, stuff that I can bring up as we go through the career mode and talk about these players week in and week out. I'll bring that back up again when we get to the end of the episode here. But going over recruiting classes, you can see we had one of the top recruiting classes in the country. You can see not a ton of 5-star prospects abound. UCLA, Texas, and Ohio State, as well as Bama, all were able to bring in 3 5-star recruits. We were tied for first in the nation in 4-star recruits that we brought in, with Penn State, 11 4-stars to help us complete. It was a small class, only 16 people, but it ended up being the 5th overall class in the nation. Miami University brought in 18 3-stars, which is pretty impressive. Clemson brought in 17 for their very strong class. And then you can see who brought in the most 2- and 1-stars. And obviously those are fairly weak classes. Western Kentucky, interestingly, brought in 13 1-stars, but they got a 4-star in there as well. So that player's going to be sorely disappointed when he sees the talent he's working with. But, it is what it is. Minnesota had the biggest class, brought in 25 guys, 14th overall. So even though they were 5-7 last year, they'll probably be very good this year. As we look through the top 10 classes, of course, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Clemson, Florida State, all expected top programs. I think Alabama was 8th. So exactly what you'd expect from these big name programs to have really solid and impressive recruiting classes. Us being in there at 5th, of course, Pitt not known for being a heavily strong, team as far as recruiting is concerned. But when you finish 12-2, 8-5, and 12-2 in consecutive years, you make the college football playoff, you win the ACC championship, and you've made 2 ACC championship games in the last 3 years, you're going to start getting those high-end recruits. And I think the biggest problem for us is maybe our scouting department. We found some players that scouting services identified as good players, but then, I don't pre-scout because I like to make it a bit of a, luck of the draw when you find a player. Is he going to be good? Is he not? Because it adds some randomness to the career mode. Plus, it helps me from, finding all gems and recruiting gems and just stocking my team full. And so, when you do eventually scout the player after signing him, I don't scout till after I sign the players. When you scout them and find out, are they good or not? Were they a gem? Were they a bust? It adds that sense of realism, because sometimes a guy's a 4-star or a 5-star and he comes onto campus and he doesn't do it for you. He doesn't perform for your school, and unfortunately he's a negative, versus sometimes you sign a 3-star and he turns out to be one of the best players at your program's history. And so I like that aspect of it, of not knowing that a player is going to turn into that, and having that little bust or boom after the fact, as opposed to just finding the guys that I know are gems and are gonna be good. You can go through, I'm showing kind of the top ranked classes here. You saw the kind of the top 30 there or so programs and their recruiting classes, so maybe your favorite school was in there. I'm also showing the weak classes, so you can see the bottom level teams. They're mostly group of 5, but I looked for kind of the lowest rated Power 5 schools. Kansas was in there, and I think Maryland was the next lowest Power 5 class. So just a variety of getting to see those particular teams and those particular players. We're also going to take a look at just the top recruits around the country, because number one, it gives you that sense of immersion of where some of these top players going to be at next season, and the teams that we could expect to have those players and the impact they might make, as well as just see what we were able to bring in and any of the guys maybe we tried for that we weren't able to bring in. So Jay Keys, like I mentioned already, I scouted him to show you what his actual overall will be, and it turned out to be 78. He was projected as an 80, comes in as a 78, and you can see by looking at his skills, solid throwing stats. They definitely need to go up a little bit, but he has good speed, not great speed, very good catching, 80, so he could be a solid possession player. He's an incredible route runner, 87 route running. So to be honest, he's not going to play quarterback from day one because Kenny Pickett is there. I'll probably leave him as a quarterback, but I think he's going to see a lot of snaps as a receiver for us this year. You got Ryan Williams, goes to Texas. Looks like a very good player. Probably will be a receiver as well. He's projected as an 81 out of Paris, Texas, so he stays home and goes to Texas. Number 1 halfback in the country, Justin Martin, goes to Ball State. Pretty impressive pickup for them, and probably one of the only good players in their class. Number 3 athlete in the country, Lawrence Lucas, going to Penn State. C catching, I think decent carrying, so probably a running back if I remember correctly. Justin Sims, tight end. So Alabama, Clemson, you can see them bringing in big classes there. Look at that, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, UCLA, Florida State. Those teams bringing in all the 5- and 4-star recruits. North Carolina did get in there with one. FAU actually had a 5-star, and I think USF did as well. So interesting that USF and FAU were able to snag a couple of Florida 5-stars. Not sure if maybe they're throwing some of that Florida money at them. Who knows? You can speculate on that. But it'll be interesting to see. Number 1 quarterback in the country, Sean Parks, went to Florida State, who's going to need some quarterbacks. J.J. Cosentino and DeAndre Francois, both either graduating or declaring for the NFL draft. And so they're going to potentially need him right away. Tim Flowers goes to Louisville, which is good for them. They'll have Juwan Pass starting with Lamar Jackson going to the NFL. But he'll definitely be playing sooner rather than later. Justin Walden was the number 2 rated quarterback in the country. We brought him in, but unfortunately, his recruit rating went down to a 68 as a quarterback. He was a real bust, -8. And so, unfortunately for us, he probably won't ever see the field as a quarterback. We may look into moving him to another position where he can be more valuable to us, just because we have Jay Keys coming in who can be a quarterback. AC Reese already on the depth chart. So Walden, just doesn't have any room to grow into the lineup there. But at least he can play quarterback in a pinch if we needed him to. You can look at a ton of receivers in the top 100. Look at that. It was already, the top 50. There was like 15 receivers in that particular list of players. So a lot of good receivers in this crop that we'll see come out to play here. For us, Lamar Davis, 2nd ranked center in the country, number 67 prospect overall, and he was a +2, 79 overall, so he could turn out to be the number 1 rated center in that class. We don't know what the top center projected out to be. Drew Holland also, number 99 rated player in the class, number 3 rated strong safety, +3 as well, so 79 overall already. Incredible speed. He runs a 4.440, so he's really a player that I think is going to be fantastic for us at strong safety. He can really help in run defense because of that speed, closing speed that he'll have on players. He was the fastest player in the class that we picked up, at least as far as the top 100 guys that we're looking at. We had 5 top 100 recruits that we were able to sign, which is fantastic. Of course, Davis, Walden, Holland, Butler, Keys. Walden, didn't really turn out to be a top 100 prospect as a bust, but everybody else, very, very good overalls that we were able to bring in. Some guys that we went after that'll be interesting to see how they shape up in the future. Johnny Garcia in the top 100, Ewing in the top 100, both went to ACC schools. And some other guys that, had us in the top. But Garcia, Ewing, Thornton, who went to Ole Miss as a receiver, those were all guys we actively went after. So it'll be interesting to see how their careers play out. A couple of big names we went after, you saw in the last video, transferred already. So hopefully the same fate doesn't befall those guys. But as we go through the players one more time, like I mentioned, the big thing is I love when you guys contribute to the career mode and feel like you're invested in it, into the Dynasty. Let me know if there's a player in this career mode that you want to rename. Give me what their new number should be if it's potentially available on the roster, gear they should be wearing, their new name, which player they're replacing, and a backstory of that player, because a lot of times the backstory will help the, if there's a tie or anything like that. I like to have those backstories, and I'll work them into the career mode as best I can. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. With future videos on the off-season and the depth chart changes and things like that. Any player position changes, that'll be coming up. And then there'll be a video in probably a week or so once I hear back from you guys as far as the recruits and things like that, and then I can actually take the time to edit the roster and get all those changes implemented. Then we'll have kind of a revealing the recruiting class, as we always do, episode where you can see the new recruits with their new names and things of that nature, new numbers, their gear, etc. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like I said already, hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.